Welcome, tale tellers, to Stories, Fables, Ghostly Tales. That's right, another episode for your creepy addiction. And yes, I'm still just as sick with that sore throat. But I do what I love, and I'm here for the creepy. Before I jump into our two stories today, let me know you enjoyed this episode by clicking that like button, leaving a comment, or even following me, which isn't creepy at all, so that when I make these, you get them. It's as easy as that. Okay, both our Let's Not Meet stories today are with permission from the contributors, and involves one crazy lady and a metro creep. Let's dive in. Our first story today is by NantheCowdog. Let's just all pause to take this amazing name in. Okay, that's brilliant. Now the title of this account is Crazy Lady Hates Teenagers. Ma'am, I'm 20. That's the full title. Let's get to it. I live in a small town and work in a neighboring town. I got off work last night around 10:30 and was feeling pretty okay because I didn't have to work Easter. I was planning to go to Walmart, but I wanted to get gas from a closer gas station because I had their rewards card. Now, living in a small town, there's not much to do around here, especially if you're between the ages of 15 and 20. So, going back at least 3 generations, the teens in this town, which I always call my hometown, spend their Friday and Saturday nights driving from AutoZone, down 3rd Street about 5 blocks, turning onto South Main, driving 2 blocks, turning around in the pawn shop, and driving back the way they came. I know, boring, but it's all there really is to do that isn't illegal. So, I went in and paid for my gas and noticed a woman standing in the corner glaring out of the front of the gas station. I didn't think much about it, so I just headed back inside. The night was nice, so the drag was still filled with a few cars, and the AutoZone across the street was still filled with parked cars of people around my age or a bit younger. There was also a pickup filled with high school boys in the pump across from me, who were minding their own business, getting gas and snacks. Suddenly, my chill mood is interrupted by the same angry woman who was in the store. She starts screaming in my face. I'm sure I got some of her spit on my face. Get your fucking ass home. I'm tired of all you fucking kids driving around at night. Get the fuck out of here, she screams, loud enough for the rowdy guys in the pickup next to me to go quiet. Oh, and she also said I needed to stop having sex and being a slut. I'm a virgin. She keeps yelling about teenagers and how disrespectful we are. And since I had just gotten off work, I was sort of brain dead and blanked out until I heard my gas pump tick off, and the lady was still screaming in my face, $13 of gas later. She had worked herself into a sweat and was breathing heavily, and as a somewhat overweight person myself, I can tell she was having a very hard time, and it is thanks to her size. My mouth just dropped open, and I pulled the pump out of my tank. I mustered up the only response I could think of. Ma'am, I'm 20. I just got off work. I'm getting gas. Somehow, this crazy bitch gets angrier and tried to step forward, and she's already too close, when the boys in the pickup start laughing. Hey lady, I'm 17, the driver yells. Then the 4 other boys, now out of the truck, got into the act, yelling their ages. Crazy lady, now having multiple underage targets, goes chasing them. The boys are screaming and laughing as this 60-year-old lady chases them around the truck. I thought, fuck this, and climbed into my truck. The driver of the truck, the only one who was in the truck at the time, looks at me like, now what? So I motioned for him to move. He honks and yells for his friends to jump into the bed. 3 of them made it in, except for one of the bigger kids, who I think said he was 16. The old lady had grabbed his shirt and wasn't letting go. I had started to drive away, but stopped when I heard the 16-year-old yelling for her to let him go, while the other guys told her to fuck off. She started to claw his arm with one hand and trying to push him to the ground with the other. Out of all the times for the cops not to be driving around, this was the time. I climbed out of my truck, mumbling to myself, no, 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 thinking I was going to have to save a kid who wasn't exactly too much younger than me from being killed by a crazy bitch. Thank God for the group of people across the street, because they noticed and started laughing and screaming at the crazy lady. She lets go of the 16-year-old and starts hobbling to the curb. The 16-year-old started to scramble and I, already being tall, built and filled with adrenaline, check him quickly before throwing him into the cab with the drivers and tell him to leave now in my best mum voice. The drivers nod, and the other boys are still screaming about the crazy bitch, while the 16-year-old just nodded and tried to hold back tears. He peels off and is gone. I climbed into my pickup because I see that crazy lady is coming back and started up and drive around her, telling her to go fuck herself. I decided to go on the drag, mostly to spite this crazy bitch. I drove off and went onto the drag 2 times and saw the crazy lady on the corner of the gas station with her arms crossed, flipping off every teenager who passed by. I go by the 3rd time and she's gone. I'm wondering if she went home, or worse. Went to one of the parking lots where the people parked to harass some more people. It was the latter. There she was, in the AutoZone parking lot, screaming at some girl before a guy got in between them. I stopped and watched, and was happy to see that they seemed to be handling it, and by handling it, I mean harassing her back. There was a guy who had repurposed a scooter or a cart, and kept doing circles around her. I drove off, and when it was getting late and time for curfew, I pulled over and talked to the group and the guy on the scooter, and apparently she had had enough and just trudged into the darkness behind the gas station. I pointed out that the houses behind the store are known for meth heads, and the group agreed she was probably on something. I ended up hanging out with them the rest of the night. Pretty chill people. Guy on the scooter was hilarious. I've never seen those guys in the truck again that night. I just hope that the 16-year-old wasn't too scarred. Thanks for that story, NantheCowdog. That's absolutely fantastic. Part of me really does feel for those older people. I can't fathom what could have been going through her head at the time. But a fantastic story. Let's move on to our next one. Our next story is called Metro Creep by Callipy24, which reminds me of a military missile vehicle. Maybe someone can vouch for me on this one. Alright, let's get to it. I've been in so many situations I cannot believe have not ended worse. For example, I grew up in a small town on the west coast, but moved to the DC area for college. My 2nd year in the area, I moved close to the metro, and having recently been 21, this was a big deal. Now, when I say close to the metro, I mean I was the last stop on the Orange Line in Vienna, and my apartment was a 5-minute walk away. You'd think being from a small town, I'd be more hesitant, especially after my almost kidnapping, another story for another time. But I was typically drunk, after being with my girlfriends for a night out in Arlington. Now, one night I was taking the metro back. My girlfriends lived a few stops before me, so we rode together. We were goofing around and laughing, typical recent 21-year-old drunk girl nonsense. I had noticed that a man had entered the metro at East Falls Church stop, and didn't think anything of it. He had been looking over at us since he arrived, but I figured it was just because we were being loud. My girlfriends were roommates and got off at Dunn Loring Station, 1 stop from me, and I said goodbye and sat back texting my boyfriend at the time, letting him know I was almost home, even though he lived in Seattle at the time. Finally, we get into Vienna Metro, the final stop on the Orange Line, and I got out. I wasn't the only one to get out, but that wasn't all that surprising. What was surprising was that the older man who had entered the train earlier at East Falls Church stop, which is like 90% suburbs, had been following me since he had exited the train and was walking in the dark towards my apartment complex. I didn't really panic until I jumped the fence down a route not typical to enter my apartment complex. I noticed that someone had followed me, and this area was recently being developed, so it was dark and all dirt and lumber. Stupid move on my part, but this was my normal way home. I started to walk quickly, and I heard him start saying, "Hey, wait!" I started running and heard him following me, still yelling for me to wait up and slow down. Finally, I saw my building and I hauled butt, digging through my purse for my key fob to get inside. At this point, he had caught up to me and was at the curb asking me to let him in because, of course, he forgot his key fob also. I noped the shit out of there and found my fob and let myself in, slamming the door shut. I ran upstairs hearing him hitting the door, but then nothing. Once I was inside my apartment, I teared into my roommate's room and cried in her bed. I never heard anything bad that had happened that night and never met that man again. But I can honestly say, he scared the ever-living out of me and I never walked home from the metro alone again. Mr. Drunk Creep, let's not meet. Whoa, that was an intense story. I mean, you're really fortunate that that guy didn't catch up to you and do anything else to you. So I'm super glad, Callipy24, that you're safe. And thank you so much for the story. Both these stories carry with them a strong message. Sometimes you can't help but be confronted by the weird, and other times the weird just wants a way in. But I'm really happy on both accounts. Our contributors are safe, and a big thank you for providing me the approval to share these great Let's Not Meet stories. So Telltellers, you can reach me on my Twitter handle, check me out on VidMe and YouTube, and for all you podcast fanatics out there, I'm on iTunes, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, and plenty more. That's right, I'm trying to be everywhere with my super sore throat. So you can find me there as well if you want to take me traveling. Okay, Telltellers, stay creepy, and as always, till next time. Time for some bloopers. The drivers nod, and the other boys are still screaming about how the crazy bitch, while this... Nope. Oh gosh. This story is so great, it has me wanting to drink. Our next story is by Metro Creep. No, it's not. It is not by Metro Creep. It is indeed by Callipy24. I screwed it up. Okay. Must have a drink, cause my throat is parched. Ah, that is good. Nothing like some hot Earl Grey tea. Okay. Where was I?